Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. And I just want to welcome our speaker this afternoon, Eva Estebas, who is going to talk to us about learning English pronunciation. Eva is an alumna of UCL. She did her MA Phonetics here and her PhD in Phonetics here. And now she's a very successful teacher and researcher in phonetics, both English and Spanish. But the real reason I've invited her to come and talk to us this afternoon is the appearance of a recent book called Teach Yourself English Pronunciation, which was very exciting to me because it has lots of really exciting new ways of doing exercises in it, new ways of presenting them. And what I really liked about the book is that it sums up the UCL approach that Eva acquired 15 years ago when she was here. It's got this nice balance between ear training and production, and it gets straight on to practical matters without too much discussion of theory. So I'm very grateful to her for coming along. I think if you give her a round of applause to welcome her.
Applause without doing anything. Right, so thank you, Michael, for the invitation. It's a great honor to be here and give this small talk to you. Basically, the aim of my presentation, of my talk, is to present a few ideas of how non-native speakers of English can help themselves to learn English pronunciation. And what I'm going to do is just present a few exercises, a few activities, and also give you some hints and strategies of materials that I have created for my own students. I am trying to teach English pronunciation in Spain, so most of my students are Spanish, and I've worked through some materials for them to learn on their own, so to learn at home without any face-to-face tuition. All the materials I have created are produced from the perspective of a non-native speaker, that's me, because my first language is Catalan and I also speak Spanish. So basically, my contribution is somehow all the struggles and the problems I've had when I was learning English pronunciation somehow are in a way, how can I say, they are projected in the materials I have produced. And finally, all the materials I have created are aimed at intelligibility. I'm not trying my students to reproduce English as native speakers of English, but I want them to be understood and I want them to understand other speakers of English. So the idea is basically for them to be intelligible. As you most probably know, Spanish and English have very different phonological systems, so sometimes Spanish speakers have difficulties in understanding and producing English, so that's the idea. So basically, as I said, the focus is intelligibility. Now, all the materials I've created and what I'm going to present in a couple of seconds are somehow contextualized within 4 types of learning. Distance learning, because I work at the Distance Learning University in Spain, that's the Open University, so I don't have, again, my students are not in front of me, they are far away at their houses. So that's the idea, so I wanted to create materials as friendly and as possible for them to work on their own. Autonomous learning, it's derived from the distance learning type of learning because, as I said, they need self-evaluation exercises, they need to have immediate feedback, and that's the context in which I have created those materials. Then long life learning. Some of my students are, maybe they want to go back to the materials again, they want to revise them to just, practice now and then. So again, the perspective of these materials is within this kind of long life learning. And finally, e-learning. I've just produced a few materials which work with a computerized environment, okay? So basically, that's the 4 types of learning within which my materials I'm going to present today have been designed. Now, the learners or the students I've got, basically all of them have a good level of English in terms of grammar, in terms of syntax. However, they've got little knowledge on pronunciation. So the idea is basically to create materials which cover a whole course on English pronunciation, and that's the topics I'm going to present in the materials, which is vowels, consonants, combination of consonants, that is clusters, consonant clusters, words in company. All these 4 areas cover the segmental level. And then I move on to stress, to rhythm, to the location of accent, that's accent placement and new information, and to intonation, which is the suprasegmental level. So I cover both levels, but I try to be, as you will see, to explain them in the easiest way possible. Most of the times I don't even mention what's a plosive. I just give examples, and they can actually understand what a plosive is, but I'm not using difficult terminology or difficult concepts. So that's the idea. So the students have a good level of English, but very little knowledge on English pronunciation. Now the methodology I used, as I say, this is addressed for Spanish speakers, but it could be used for any, the methodology can be used for any audience. For Japanese, I see that there's a lot of crowd here. So the idea basically, I depart always from a common mistake. So I always make a Spanish speaker to produce an English item, word, sequence of words, and see how a non-trained student produces a particular aspect. Then the students hear a native English speaker producing the same item with the expected pronunciation. That is a good point, because in a way the students can, listening to a common mistake, they have to be critical. They have to see, well, that's exactly what I do, and that's wrong, or that's right, or I can see that it is different. So comparing, using cross-languages comparisons, comparing one language and another language, I think is very useful for teaching, and that's why I try to promote with my students. Then I describe a little bit, as I said, with very easy explanations, the item we are focusing at, let's being, I don't know, a vowel or an intonation pattern, etc. Then for vowels, well, I move on to common spellings, and we just talk about a little bit about the differences in spelling in English and in English, basically, the differences between pronunciation and spelling. And finally, I move on to ear training exercises, which are the ones that I'm going to present today. And then I also compare some accents, but we are not going to pay much attention on that. We are going to basically have a look at a few exercises and activities in the ear training section. Now, as I said, the types of explanations try to be straightforward for them to understand, and in line with UCL's tradition of phonetics teaching, I'm always presenting all types of items in a contrastive way, using minimal pairs. So the sheep and ship story, it's extended to all areas, with intonation, with rhythm, with stress location. And that's, I think, for a learner on its own, in the corner of its room, all alone, I think that's the best way to learn and to understand English pronunciation, by means of comparing and contrasting. Now, no, that's right. I have to go back now, so I'm going to move on to, let me see, to the materials themselves. And I'm going to show you a little example. I'm going to just show an example of the 3 English contrasts of vowels R and A and A. Okay? So as I said, I'm going to just very briefly show you the methodology for one particular tip, and then I'm going to carry on for the rest of them. So basically, what the students find when they just get into this material is they just listen to a Spanish speaker producing these 3 words. Again, the transcription is also provided because I think visual aids are very important, especially, again, as I said, if you are an autonomous learner. So they hear something like
van,
which, as you can see, no vocalic contrast. The R is produced in the first case, the case of barn. And then they have to go on and listen to an English speaker. Right, the idea here again is basically for them to see, oh God, that's exactly what I do, or yes, I can see that there are lots of differences. Maybe I don't know how to describe them, I don't know what goes on yet, but basically the idea is for them somehow to have, like, how can I say, an impact on them and see whether they actually produce the same or not. Then we go to the tip description, and as I've said, for the tip description, because I'm not using difficult terminology, I always try to use kind of, I'm not saying funny, but easy explanations. So for example, to produce R, I told them to just try to yawn or gargle and say ah like that, okay? So for example, ah, as if you were yawning, okay? Now, if we move on to a, sometimes what I do, and I think this is applicable to all languages, you can actually work this out with Japanese too, maybe just go from a sound you already have in Japanese and move on to the English sound in case it is similar, in case you think this can help. For example, for the a sound, I tell produce a Spanish a and then move on to the English one. Okay, which is a bit different. And finally, I also, well, sometimes I say, well, for the production of the short one, to make produce a short Spanish a. Okay, that's a. Okay. As I said, well, we've got lots of examples, etc. And then, as I said, what we do basically is just use the contrastive approach and then
log, luck, lock, bird, bird, bird.
and etc. That's what you are using here. I suppose that's what you are doing in this course, and maybe when you practice on your own too. Now, if we move on to your training, the types of exercises, which is what I'm going to show you, well, there are several kinds of exercises. One of them is just this one, just in a closed set of words, find out the word that is being produced and basically concentrate on one particular sound, in that case the a sound, okay? So basically they have to say which one the speaker is producing.
Burn,
Which I think is this one.
ban,
Okay, ban. Which one do you think it is? 1, 2, 3. First one,
burn,
second,
ban, ban, burn.
yeah. Now, basically here, at the end, we are not going to do the whole exercise with check answers, but we've done pretty well. Right? And, well, no, I'm just showing you the type of exercise, okay? Again, unfortunately, I've recorded all these materials in Spain. I didn't have Michael or John or someone to record those materials for me, so there were like native English speakers, they are native English speakers from the southern area of Britain, okay? Now, again, then we can have exercises in which you just spot on one single word without comparing out of a set of words, for example, this one.
Last,
Okay, so again,
bar,
bar, yeah.
sand,
Okay, so that's the same kind of exercise. At the very end, you check your answers. You've done it right. You can show answers if you want to. The materials can give you the solutions, and also you can restart and do it again if you want to. Now, finally, I also incorporated or tried to figure out these minimal pairs embedded into longer sentences, because sometimes we are pretty good when we listen to the contrast with the short items, but then when it's in longer sentences, maybe it's a bit more difficult. It was a bit difficult sometimes to find sentences that make sense, but I tried to do my best. And for example, here, the students, what they have to say is that they have to just order and see which sentence is firstly produced. First, second, and third. So they have to write a number in the box. So for example,
I paid £300 for a cut. I paid £300 for a cart. I paid £300 for a cat.
okay, and the same in here.
He's got to be buck. He's got to be back. He's got to be bark.
Okay, so basically I think that's the idea. I hope you've spotted the same way. Same.
There's no harm. There's no ham. There's no home.
Right, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so basically again, the idea here, I think the important thing is to locate the items in longer sentences and see how the students, somehow they go from this minimal pair, just focusing on features, to longer sentences. Okay? So that's the first type of exercise I wanted to show. Now I'm going to move on to another example, this time from consonants. For consonants, well, you know that one of the somehow most important, let's say, features is aspiration in English. In Spanish, we don't aspirate, and we've got problems when we try to produce some words that where aspiration is required. For example, again, I show you the common example.
Pai, doi, kau,
Expected one.
pie, toy, cow,
Okay. Now, in here, again, what I always tell them, because sometimes it's difficult to tell what aspiration is if they are not in front of you, I always say, try to make the vowel as it was whispered, okay? Like pie, as it was whispered. Because if you whisper the vowel, basically aspiration is that the vowel doesn't start vibrating at the point we're expecting to vibrate, which is when you open your articulators after the production of the consonant. So I try to say, if you produce the vowel in whisper, or part of the vowel in whisper, pie, tie, koi, that helps. And this, I think they can, somehow they can understand what whisper is, and I hope this helps. Now, I always use, as I said, just focusing on the contrast, I always try to find words which are the same in both languages, maybe just nouns, like names, proper names, okay? And again, the good thing is that to compare them. Names in which, apart from, well, there are other differences in terms of vowels and consonant pronunciation, but I want them to just pay attention on aspiration. And if you just, for the Japanese audience or for people from other countries, if they can find words, similar words in both languages, and you can actually compare them, I think that's really, really, really helpful for students and useful. So, for example,
pam,
Pam,
tina,
Tina,
Kate,
Kate,
you see, it's like in this type of minimal pair contrast, even though, I mean, well, cross-language comparison, I think this helps too. And also another strategy that I want them to pay attention to is to listen to an English speaker producing a Spanish word, or a Japanese word, or a French, or a Romanian word, I don't know. Because I think this is also very, very enlightening. And because, for example, in Spanish we don't have aspiration, okay? But a Spanish speaker that produces these three words, palo, torre, come, that is stick, that is a towel, and that is to eat. Right, an English speaker would say,
palo, torre, come,
okay, so again, seeing what the person of the other language would do while producing your own is another way of somehow giving ideas of which topics or which aspects you have to just concentrate on. Okay, again, then there is, again, the minimal pair.
pool, tall, cool,
This contrast, okay, so that works in all areas again.
pin, tin, kin,
Pin, tin, kim. Produce it with as if the vowel was whispered or partially whispered. Okay. Now, ear training. Again, another type of exercise I use. I was a bit reluctant at the beginning to use this type of exercise because it's actually using words wrongly produced. And I want them to spot which are right and which are wrong, where the pronunciation that they hear is right or is wrong. Again, sometimes to give input which is wrong is not what you want to give them. But again, if they are able to spot whether something has been aspirated or not, I think that's, again, of great help. Okay, so basically, I'm using, again, this type of exercise in which you have to say whether park, for example, has been aspirated or not.
park,
In that case, it has been aspirated, but
car,
wrong and
time,
wrong and
tell,
right and
pull,
wrong. Okay, so it's another step forward. If they can actually, identify whether it's right or wrong, that means that they already know what they are looking for, and it's a step forward. And then maybe it's somehow they can go on and help themselves and try to do it themselves. Okay, so that's the idea. Again, I also try to use aspects of it. For example, what I'm trying to say here is that obviously I've just, well, let me see if I can. The whole materials I've talked about basically phonemic contrast, that is vowels and consonants that trigger a meaning, a phonetic difference, okay? However, I've used aspiration and devoicing because they are very important too. Even though they are allophonic variations, they are crucial for the speakers to be intelligible. Because it's right that the phoneme is a per, and the phoneme itself is not aspirated or not. But when we have to use it, we have to aspirate in certain contexts. So what I'm saying is that we have added in the material all those allophonic variants that are useful for intelligibility. And those I've selected are basically aspiration of pataka and devoicing of obstruents or in final position, which they trigger the lengthening or shortening, in that case, of the preceding vowel. So for those that are well acquainted with that, we are going to see a couple of examples here. Now again, so I've also tried to produce minimal pairs for topics such as aspiration. For example, here they have to decide whether they say Kate spared or Kate spared, and see whether we can find it out. Let's see.
Kate spared. Kate spared.
So aspiration is on the first one, and on the second one is not aspirated. In here,
It's stalked. It's talked.
aspiration is on first or second. On the second, yes. Or in here,
Rick schooled. Rick's cooled.
aspiration on the second. That's right. Maybe that's a bit more tricky to do it in but let's see if we check our answers. We've done well. So again, good news. Right. And also another type of exercise I've devised is basically that the students, before listening, they have to think whether they would aspirate a particular item. So for example, cold coffee, or take your time, or type the letter. All these underlying sounds, they have to try to figure out before they listen to the solution whether they would aspirate it or not. So just think before they actually listen to the exercise. So for example, in cold time, in cold coffee, what would you think? Would that be aspirated or not? The K in cold, aspiration or not? Yes, and in coffee? Yes, so we would mark that, and then we'd listen.
Cold coffee.
And yes, well, that's aspirated. I mean, I'm not going to go over that again, but again. So that's another idea. Try to, before listening, that's another possibility of using another strategy. Try to think, whether how would you produce that, and then check whether you've decided it's fine or not, okay? All right. Now I'm going to move on to, just very briefly, to another, that's voicing for vowel, for consonants. I'm going to just have a quick look on the distinction between English s and z, like in su, zu. Well, in here, because these materials, as I've said, are addressed to Spanish speakers, well, every time we've got a similar sound, I just use this little funny face, okay? So here, Spanish speaker maybe would say not something like
Su. Su.
no contrast, or sometimes very difficult to produce the voiced counterpart of su, the zu. That's difficult for us.
Su. Zoo.
Okay. Now, one way again of telling them how to do that is basically I say, well, that's the same type of sound we've got in Spanish or in Japanese, or this again could be applied to any language. So try to produce a long voiceless sound, and in the middle start singing. And if you start singing, you immediately would produce the voiced counterpart. So for example, okay, so if you do the same for all fricatives. If you say you've got the voiced counterpart. The same for so start with the voiceless one, which is usually, you can do that, do the singing. You are just doing the voiceless one, you are whispering, but if you produce it louder, that's right. Okay, or the same with, I don't know, that's right. I'm not saying whether they have to be in tune or not, that's different. The only thing I'm telling them is just try to sing, and then all of a sudden they produce the voiced one. And once they somehow feel it and grasp it, then it's again step forward, fingers crossed. Now again, we do lots of contrastive work with them.
Sip, zip, said, zed, sing, zing,
Sing, exactly. Sing.
racing, raising, buses, buzzes,
Buzz, okay, so that's it. And then the other thing I mentioned before, again, you know that this means the little circle is devoicing. You know about that, I suppose, or because you've done it. So devoicing meaning that obviously in this context, voiced sounds lose part of their voicing, and that means that this sound here and this sound there, so they sound almost the same. So basically, the cue the students have to look at to differentiate between these two words is not the voicing of the final sound, but is the duration of the previous sound. So again, because that is important for intelligibility, that's why I've also added that. So this word would be shorter. This sound here, obviously, the R sound, and this one is going to be a bit longer. So let's have a look at that.
bus, buzz, dice, dies,
Sometimes I ask them to clap. Well, so dies, bus, the whole word, because otherwise it's impossible just to focus on a particular, just on the vowel. But you say dies, buzz, okay? So that helps them a little bit to have, like a physiological feeling of what's going on here, okay? So that's basically what I wanted. Just a few examples on vowels and consonants, the type of approach I'm using, contrastive, comparing, cross languages, etc. I'm going to move on to another topic now, which is rhythm. I'm going to just give you a few examples of how I work with rhythm. Basically, rhythm, English rhythm is called stress time rhythm. Again, it's maybe not entirely stress time. I mean, there are, if we could measure the syllables, we can see that maybe it's not the exact duration from one stress to the next stress, but still there is a tendency of having the same amount of time between stresses. And this stress time rhythm, for example, for non-native speakers of English, from the Spanish students, is very difficult for us, because for us, we actually more or less have an equal duration from one syllable to the other, no matter whether it's a stress or not. So I want to emphasize that they have to pay attention to the stressed syllables and go from one stressed syllable to the next stressed syllable. And the way I'm trying to show them is through songs. I want them to first of all listen to the song. For example, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, and then what I do is basically, the asterisk means a stressed syllable, and the numbers below means the number of unstressed syllables from one stressed syllable to the next one. So for example, in here is 0, okay, and here is 1, which is your row your boat. And in here is merrily, it's 2 unstressed syllables, okay? So first of all I say, well, listen to the song, and try to just keep the tempo and sing along. So basically that's how it sounds.
row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream.
Sing along if you want to, yes. Then I say, well, once you've done that, row, row, row your boat, you've got like a tempo, just try to recite this.
Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream.
I know that's not exactly how English people talk, okay, but again, this is, we have to pay attention from one stress to the next, from one stress to the next. So they've got this rhythmic pattern of the song and the reciting, and then I say, well, yes, fun, fantastic. Now let's try to just find out an invented text or a real speech that fits in within the same pattern of the song. Again, maybe this is nonsense and what I'm going to tell now, but for example, I'm going to show you now these two sentences which exactly follow the same rhythm as that of the song. So for example,
row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. John, Pam, Mike and James went to take the train. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. Singing and dancing and laughing so loudly that people turned away.
I know I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that's basically what I want them is to focus on the stresses, okay? And then they just can listen to the invented text alone without actually, depending on the song, for example.
John, Pam, Mike and James went to take the train. Singing and dancing and laughing so loudly that people turned away.
Again, even though I don't think English people will talk like that, but they've got a bit of the pattern, and actually, I want them to focus on this rhythmic, distribution. Now, for the year training, again, we've got, all the highlights of English traditional songs here. But again, for example, here it's the same. I want them to mark the stressed syllables, okay? So I want them to just tick on the stressed syllables from the song.
Hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle, the cow jumped over the moon. The little dog laughed to see such sport, and the dish ran away with the spoon.
Move on to reciting. Sorry.
Hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle, the cow jumped over the moon. The little dog laughed to see such sport, and the dish ran away with the spoon.
Okay, you can do that with lots of songs. I'm not going to go over it because it's going to take us. How much is that dog in the window? Little Miss Muffet, all the highlights. Then I asked them to do that on just real sentences. I mean, say normal sentences, not sentences that belong to any song, for example.
John should have told me. You shouldn't have bought a yellow phone.
Shouldn't have bought a yellow phone. Or
Sally's forgotten to pass it to John.
Sally's forgotten to pass it to John. Okay, so they have to locate the stresses. And then, again, just the next exercise here is basically to, to just try to match one of those sentences that they've just listened to. See with, how are they equivalent with the ones on the song. So, for example, here,
Hey diddle diddle, John should have told me.
Hey diddle diddle, John should have told me. So it's the same. For example, the next one, the cat and the fiddle. Well, we haven't seen all of them, but the cat and the fiddle is basically the same as this one. So they have to choose from a variety of sentences which one has the same pattern, the rhythmic pattern. So
The cat and the fiddle. Your sister will join us.
it's the same. Again, the cow jumped over the moon. So here, let me see, I don't remember which one was that. I said, this one.
The cow jumped over the moon. I thank you for picking me up.
You see, the cow jumped over the moon. I thank you for picking me up. So it's the same. So it's basically just maybe trying to find some help out of things that are nearer to us, like songs or maybe poems or things that can be of help. Okay, so that's basically the idea. At the very end, once we already know, basically they have to just place the location of the stresses at the sentence level without actually comparing to any songs or anything. So that's the idea. So that's the progress from songs to reciting to real speech and then to non-invented sentences. Okay, so that's something that you can use to not only Spanish speakers. I think it can be of use to anybody. Right, now, after having said that, I'm going to devote some time on intonation. But before that, I'd like to show you a little bit what I've done for that. Because one of the main problems I had is basically how to teach intonation in distance learning when the students were far away. And intonation, as you must probably know, it's a difficult topic. It's difficult to teach and learn because sometimes it's difficult to categorize something which is continuous. So if I do ooh, 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 which are the important bits here? I mean, it's tricky, okay? That's the first point. And then it's context and speaker dependent because it depends on the situation, on the environment. If I say this is lovely, okay, that fits. If I say this is lovely, it is also possible. If I say this is lovely, it is also possible. But it very much depends on the context, on the meaning the speaker wants to convey. So again, this is a very simplified way of putting it, but there have been two different schools. The British school, which you are well acquainted now because you've been trained in the British school, which basically describes intonation movements by means of the pitch trajectory. So if you say no, that's high fall. It starts high and it falls. Then the American school, very briefly, because there have been lots of frameworks and lots of different paradigms within the American tradition, but they instead of just talking about the pitch movement itself, it talks about targets, and it says, well, this is high, so that's H, and this is low, L. High stands for, H stands for high, L for low. So if this is high, this is low, the pitch movement from high to low, it falls. Okay, so it's two different perspectives. Or either talking about the whole movement, as the British school would do, or just the targets. And then obviously from something high to low, it falls, from low to high, it rises, etc. Now, for the teaching learning perspective, I've always been a supporter of this house because I've been trained here and I've been listening to Michael's and John's ear training sessions, and I think it's fantastic. However, for autonomous learning, I think it's very difficult because unless we could take Michael Ashby home with us, which maybe Patricia would be very happy, I don't know, or maybe yes, who knows, unless we could just bring the teacher home with us. How do you teach, intonation when the students are not in front of you? So I've just designed a little bit, not designed, but I figured out a new proposal, which is a mixture of the British school and the American school. And basically, what I take from the British school is the tunes and the association of certain pitch movements to tunes. So if I say, I don't like it, that's somehow reservation to this show, okay? Or I like it, this means involvement, you are happy, you are. So this, I somehow keep on with this kind of tradition. But then, for the description of the actual movements, I'm based on the American tradition, basically on the Toby system. The Toby system, I don't know whether you've heard about that. It's a system which has been used over the past maybe 2 decades for analyzing intonation. And this system basically describes intonation by means of high tones and low tones. And that's what I'm going to use a little bit. So in order to understand what I'm proposing here, basically we need to differentiate very clearly what is a stressed syllable and what is an accented syllable. I'm sure you know, but just to recap, in case we forgot. A stressed syllable is a syllable which has rhythmical prominence, right? And we know which syllables are stressed or unstressed because it's part of our mental lexicon. So every single speaker of a native language know that table is stressed on the first syllable and balloon on the second. And that's just in terms of rhythm. Now, an accented syllable, apart from having rhythmical prominence, it also has pitch prominence, which is that there is a pitch movement associated to that, okay? Now, the idea basically is that all accented syllables have to be stressed first. So, for example, if I've got this sentence, my daughter is a musician. What I've got here, each box represents a syllable. Now, the blue boxes represent that this syllable has a pitch movement, a relevant pitch movement. Okay, so for example, my daughter, there is a peak here in the pitch contour, and the same here, my daughter is a musician. So I've got here 2 stresses, do and z, okay? 2 stresses, one on the first syllable of daughter and the second syllable of musician, and 2 accents, because each of these stresses is associated to a peak, okay? Now in here, I've got 2 stresses, but only the same, daughter and musician, okay? That's the same, the stress pattern is exactly the same, but only 1 accent, because there is only 1 pitch prominence associated. So my daughter is a musician, and this is Tim this morning talk about the location of the main accent, the displacement of the main accent, and this type of phenomenon is highly used in English. Okay, so the displacement of the main accent is the most prominent word. So once we know that, basically the proposal is to associate tones, high, mid, or low. I've incorporated a mid tone too, to these accented syllables, and also to the edges of the pitch contour. So for example, my daughter is a musician. So here, that's high, so H. That's high, so H. At the end is low, so L. So this H, M, and L can only occur in an originally stressed syllable, which becomes accented, and at the edges of an utterance. So in a way, the students have a visual aid of where they have to actually produce the pitch movement. So my daughter is a musician. Okay, so that's how I think it works. Now, just very quickly, there is an equivalence of this proposal to the British model. So, for example, a high fall would be HL. No, Melanie, for example. A low fall would be ML, something starts mid-pitch and falls. No, Melanie. Now, a high rise, that would be, no, Melanie, so starting mid, going to high. Again, this is on one, this is where the whole movement takes place in one syllable. This is if it has post-stressed syllables, okay, and accented syllables. But that's the way this would work. Now, low rise, no, Melanie. Okay, so the same. And the idea here is that the student knows where he has to produce the relevant pitch differences, okay? And for rises, well, we need more tones actually, because those are complex tones. So, no, okay, H, L, H, Melanie, H, L, H, okay? And the student knows whereabout he has to somehow produce the pitch differences. For rises, rise, fall, no, Melanie, okay, so the same. Now, for pre-nuclear accents, the British system is really rich. It's got lots and lots. It's rising and stepping and low and high. I've just decided for the students, again, in a long learning, a distance learning environment, I've decided to just get rid of most of them and just concentrate on whether something is high or low. Low can be maybe sometimes L or M. But there have been studies, I mean, it's not that I've invented that myself. There have been studies in which they've shown that, for example, in Spanish, if you say something like, come mandarinas, that means he's eating mandarins, okay, or oranges, whatever, come naranjas, let's say it like that, come naranjas. If you say come naranjas, that is the same, exactly the same sentence at the terms of the segments, but different intonation movements. Now, if you could cut the prenuclear comena and the nuclear, and if you just cut it, you manipulate the pitch movement and the pitch contour, and you just cut the first part, and you show a Spanish student come or come, just by listening to that, they know whether what's going to come afterwards is going to be a declarative or a question, because just the prenuclear configuration says that. However, if you just if you take what is nuclear and you put it in a pre-nuclear environment, so you just make things going crazy, okay? What happens is that even though they can actually spot from the very beginning what type of sentence is, whether declarative or not, if the final and nuclear part is the opposite, okay? If you just mix up a declarative and an interrogative, they will rule out the first pre-nuclear, what they've heard at the beginning, and they will identify the sentence according to the nuclear type of accent. So because of that, I think we have to just focus on the nuclear configuration for our students and for the learners. And the pre-nuclear one, obviously, it is important, but I don't think they have, especially for beginners, for people that are not into intonation or they don't want to just carry on, very deep intonation studies, I think we have to somehow, let's not pay much attention to the pre-nuclear configuration because it's less, important in terms of meaning, okay? So just very briefly, I'm going to show you, well, that's for example, are you coming? Okay, that's a couple of examples. Mary's nice. Okay, that's again the type of how can I say, the type of notations I'm using. So I'm going to just very briefly show you a few examples, again on intonation, and basically, for example, how this system can be used. Statements, for example. Okay. For example, here you see again that's a statement. That's a declarative sentence is produced with an involved and lively pitch.
Yes. She's nice. It's rather expensive.
So basically here again, the high-low, so that the students know exactly the movement that has to go and exactly where it is located. It's rather expensive. Okay, so they actually know in which place they have to produce the pitch movement. Again, for a routine, lack of interest, disappointment.
Yes. She's nice. It's rather expensive.
Again, right, so it's not that involved in that. Finally, when someone talks with reservations, for example,
Yes. She's nice. It's rather expensive.
okay, so basically, again, more or less they know exactly where they have to locate all the pitch differences. Now, once having done that, maybe what they can do is just try to find whether they can actually produce these and see whether they can do it properly. Okay, so for example, she can come on Monday. He might. Okay, so high-low. So let's see.
She can come on Monday. He might.
Here,
She can come on Monday. He might.
she can come on Monday. He might. And finally, she can come on Monday. He might. Okay, so again, see.
She can come on Monday. He might.
Okay? So basically, the year training exercises again are based on that. For example, here, they are listening to the sentence, I'm pleased with you. And they can have, I'm pleased with you, just a high form. I'm pleased with you, just a mid-low. Or, I'm pleased with you, but not very much, you see. So we have to identify again in a contrastive way which one he produces. Let's see.
I'm pleased with you.
What do you think? I'm pleased with you. I think that's the first one, I don't know.
I'm pleased with you.
Involved, isn't it? What someone said? I don't know.
I'm pleased with you.
I'm pleased with you. Can you see? I'm pleased with you. But maybe not much. Can you see that? Well, we need more of your training, maybe.
I'm pleased with you.
No interest. Well, that's the idea. Okay, let's see what we've done. Well, that's okay, more or less. That's the idea. Then, basically, you can do the same with sentences which are not contrastive, for example.
It's interesting.
What do you think? Reservations, that's right.
I didn't like it.
No interest, okay? So that's it. Now, again, I can't go. But the idea that, again, once they've done all this year training, they can just go to see whether they can produce that themselves. So how do you produce that? I think she can. Okay, and the next one? I think she can. And the other one? I think she can. Right, so for example?
I think she can. I think she can. I think she can.
Okay, and the same with a little no. 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 Okay, so say.
No. No. No.
Right? And the same here.
Probably. Probably. Probably.
Probably. Okay, so that's the idea. If we look at some other kinds of sentences, I don't know, analogy to questions, for example, the same. So here, first of all, they've got a visual aid of what they can do. For example, where's the hospital? Right, something like that.
Where's the hospital? How's your mother?
Now again, displeasure, lack of interest, well, maybe a bit more rude.
Where's the hospital? How's your mother?
And finally, polite.
Where's the hospital? How's your mother?
How's your mother? This is, hi, how's your mother? Where's the hospital? Okay, so basically, that's the idea. Again, going to the same type of exercise here.
What's your name? Which book will you buy?
Sorry.
What's your name? Which book will you buy? What's your name? Which book will you buy?
What's your name? Which book will you buy? So that's basically the way it works. Just maybe a final thing, because I think it's more or less about the time. A final thing I wanted to just show you, which I think is very interesting, and I think there's is about pitch range, and Tim mentioned that this morning, and I think especially for Spanish speakers, I don't know very well about Japanese, so you have to help me, Masaki, you have to give me some ideas, but Spanish speakers, we always use a pitch. The pitch range is the amount of pitch displacement you use when we talk. So if I say, hello, how are you? So nice to meet you. So that's a broad pitch range. If I say, oh, hello, how are you? It's nice to meet you. That's a narrow pitch range. Again, the hands, maybe I shouldn't be using the hands, but sometimes I do. Well, the thing is that sometimes speakers have a narrow pitch range or a broader pitch range, and that's something intrinsic, you know what I'm saying, innate. But on a general basis, usually English speakers use a much broader pitch range than, for example, Spanish speakers do. And sometimes, because we do not use this amount of displacement, we may sound a bit rude or be like without interest. For example, if we do that, if you listen to that.
What's your name?
Melanie.
What's your name?
Melanie.
Right? If we say in Spanish, ¿Cómo te llamas? What's your name? And we say, Melanie. Well, it sounds fine. It's fine, fantastic, great, no problem, nothing rude, nothing, you know. But if we say in English, you say Melanie. You say, oh God, my God, let's move on to something, because it sounds rather wrong. So this is something because sometimes intonation is more tricky, but this is something that we have to apply. I think all these lot here, you look like Spanish speakers. I don't know whether you are, but you look Spanish. And so maybe just I'm kind of enlarging the pitch range. It sounds much. Even we can even have like problems, intelligibility problems. Because, for example, if you say in Spanish, la comida fue riquísima, the food was lovely, and we say the food was lovely. This means that the food was lovely. But if you say in English, the food was lovely, maybe the food wasn't that lovely. And if we say in Spanish, oh, la comida fue riquísima, well, I'm exaggerating, you say, oh, it is completely crazy, okay? But we have to say, oh, the food was lovely. And if we say the food was lovely in English with a broader pitch range, this is how people would say, and you'd sound nice and involved and happy and interested, etc. So, again, this is something that maybe it's easier to grasp rather than highs and lows, which is a bit more difficult, but I think it's really useful to be using and to tell your students, no matter whether they are Japanese or French or Chinese or whatever, no matter the first language. And well, that's about all. I've got more exercises if you want me to show you, but more or less that's just a small grasp of what these materials are for, and I hope I can help someone. Okay, thank you very much. I completely forgot I had two more slides. Because of this emotion, you know. So I had one which basically, just concluding, I completely forgot. Basically, for distance learning, autonomous learning, or even non-distance learning, but again, that's what you are working here with all your teachers. Minimal pairs, contrastive approach, both at the segmental and at the auto-segmental level, pitch movements, etc. And then basically, I think that comparison across languages is really important, because you can not only see the differences, but also benefit from the similarities. So I think it is important, and see how an English speaker would produce your language. That's also interesting. And then, why not presenting right and wrong presentations of the items to see whether students can spot the differences. I'm using non-technical explanations because they are not with me, so it's more. And then finally, well, visual images such as the ones on intonation. And that's what I wanted to show you, because it took me a while to do this last slide. Thank you, that's what I wanted to show you.